Okay, folks, so let's talk about Wuthering Waves and Sensor Tower. And I say those two things in a pair because it's the only place I can find on the internet that Sensor Tower needs to get burned to the ground and that it's completely unreliable. And because of it being an estimation, no one should trust it. And they're probably just making these numbers up completely and can't be trusted, can't be relied on. Now, I really like that Sensor Tower is around. I am greatly appreciative of these different resources that the public has now to have somewhat transparency in these companies and how they're using their finances, what finances they're actually making. So when they're making different decisions, we can say, yeah, you're actually being greedy. Or we can look at a game and see, hey, you know what, you're close to end of service. Maybe I shouldn't invest my money here. So I think it's worth a little bit of effort to put the fire out because, for one, I think it's a little misguided, and for two, I think it's cutting the nose off to spite the face, as it were, that this is something that's very good for consumers. And so hopefully you make both cases today, especially because I think the only thing arose because of a misunderstanding about what the data is saying about Wuthering Waves. And I'm a huge Wuthering Waves fan. I am literally invested in the game, and I'm ecstatic by all the data I'm seeing about it. But I think the confusion comes if you are looking at June 2024. I think this is where the big confusion starts. So I'm gonna try to go through this as quickly. I'm old, so you'll have to slap me in the face to keep me on track, and I easily ramble, and I'm a nerd. I love these numbers. I love looking at all this stuff. I've made spreadsheets, so I'm gonna do my best to get this all done. But I think when I show it to you, it will be a simple enough presentation that it'll build your confidence that there was nothing to worry about in the first place. And I can show you how you can check and balance to see, are these numbers reliable in the first, to begin with, because it is a valuable resource if you know how to use it well, and does make you more powerful as a consumer. So I'm hopefully going to go over those things as quickly as possible and have a positive effect on the discourse. What was wrong with the June numbers? Now, the real problem with the numbers is the social media discourse around gacha PvP. We just talk about the revenue, and anytime the revenue is close to each other, we think that these things are similar, and that is very misleading, and it put Wuthering Waves in a light that it shouldn't have been in, because these numbers are, if there's any numbers to doubt, it's the first three numbers for Wuthering Waves: the May 25.8, the June 46.3 with the inland, and this 29.5, and I think that was like Jinsi and Changli or somewhere around there, right? But why? It's because of the player numbers. You have to consider how much revenue did they make, but what did it take to make it? What was the weight class? And once you look at it that way, you can see how the industry is actually going to view the revenue report and the value of the audience. You can't get a value of the audience just from looking at the revenue because you don't know the size of the audience yet, right? And we never hear that discourse when we're looking. If you're looking around YouTube and you're just watching people talk about the various levels of revenue, you're just associating every game that's nearby each other as if they are fair competitors, appealing even to the same audience. So there's a lot of misconceptions that then can make it seem like, oh no, what happened to Wuthering Waves? Where is it? Oh, as it goes down. And now we're like, I don't want to believe this number. It should be up at 46.3 mil. And oh, now it got even worse. I think this was the 6.5 million. I'm like, all of these numbers are fantastic. So let's look at the player numbers real quick. I'm going to show you where you can get them. It's activeplayer.io. I'm going to display them first, but I did make a spreadsheet to make the analysis easier and hopefully quicker. So these are the Genshin player numbers for the last 2 years. You also have priori data to check the numbers against to see if the estimates come out. I tell you they're within about 1% of each other. These are the HSR player numbers. And these are the Zenless Zone 0 player numbers and Wuthering Waves player numbers. So you probably already noticed the big discrepancy. The spoilers is okay. I want to pull up the spreadsheet. So you've seen the spoiler. I can't make the suspense and the drama. You can tell that Wuthering Waves is a niche and very tiny compared to the big boys. So when we're looking at this month of June, if you're just looking at the revenue, you again think these guys are in the same weight class until you realize that Wuthering Waves only had 1.2 million people. And so when I saw these numbers, I was like, I don't believe this. I wail. I'm a Leviathan in Wuthering Waves. I was ecstatic to see it, but I'm like, no, this looks too good to be true. I was okay with this one. This one, I was like, there's no way. I've never seen anything like that. I've been tracking the different gacha games for 3 years on Sensor Tower. and at Magic, etc. Comparing, I'm like, I've never seen anything that high, not even close. And especially because these were supposed to be the stingy gamers, see, the casuals that just want to pay to win and watch something. These are supposed to be the people that just want to spend a lot of money, and that was the reason why everyone wants to focus on them. You got to cater to the casuals. These sweaty gamers were always supposed to be stingy people sitting in someone's basement, right? Right? They didn't have any money. They spend all their time playing a game. They're not supposed to have the money. They're definitely not supposed to spend it, because that just makes their clout less, right? So I was like, I was happy to see it, but I'm like, I'm not ready to believe it instantly. I got to figure out a way to understand it. How did they do this much money off of such a small audience? But if you didn't see that, you're thinking, oh, these guys are all in the same class and Wuthering Waves is just falling behind. These numbers, I think, are extremely realistic. They're still the most excellent numbers on the list, because they still are saying that this is the highest value targets of an audience. And that's what this data is trying to tell the industry. It's telling you, okay, if you're trying to make a game, if you're going after an audience, if you want to capture a niche, this is a very high value one. So you might not be able to move Genshin's whole audience, and it would take you moving their whole audience to generate that revenue, because they're worth very little per player. So when you're drawing these conclusions and when you're doing the analysis, for me, I'm like, okay, it's stabilized. If I've got this history with Genshin and HSR, I can see, do my conclusions make sense? If so, how does the company behave? How does the market behave? So if I'm expecting that the company will favor HSR in comparison to Genshin over the lifespan, because that audience is worth more. What did we see over the last year and a half that HSR has been around? All out war between the Genshin fans and the HSR fans, where the Genshin feels like the stepchild because HSR seems to get everything. So I'm like, oh yeah. Now, because they didn't analyze these things, and they're just saying, these guys look like they're boxing. Why are they treating HSR that way? Because they didn't actually look at the value to the company. They come up with stuff like, oh, it's a rogue director that slipped in, or they just love Honkai Star Rail because it's Honkai Impact 3rd. And I'm like, that's what happens when you're not doing the analysis properly. And it's spiraled out of control to now where we're like, we're just going to burn Sensor Tower to the ground because we're just still not doing the analysis properly, when it's very easy to understand the company's behavior and then see the validity of the data because they match up. Wouldn't you invest more in this audience than you would in this audience or this audience? So lastly, you come down and you look at something like Zenless Zone Zero, and you're seeing a revenue fall off, and the discourse is, oh no, people must be losing interest in Zenless Zone Zero. Obviously not. The player numbers went up, right? That should be obvious. You obviously have to start your conversation saying, is the game popular? Are people still playing it? That should be obvious, but it's really not on YouTube for some reason. So I just really wanted to get to put a stop to this. I don't know what to call it. This poor narrative or this system of analysis that's based on just looking at numbers, when you know that that's not how you determine if a player is happy. Were you forced to spend $20 more million this month? No. Oh, so you must be miserable. Of course not, right? Like, of course not, right? It's obvious once people say it, right? I hope so. So anyway, the last thing to analyze is then, is this trend concerning that the spending went off? Well, first of all, I don't think this is a trend. The numbers these numbers will change, and we're doing 8 minutes. These numbers should change. I'm explaining this as quickly as I can. So just ask me below if it doesn't make enough sense, and I'll elaborate in the comments. But the point is, an algorithm, if the people are actually doing what they're saying, the numbers should be changing, because you're constantly evolving as more data is added. So the numbers never should be the same. Even when you go all the way back, they should constantly be adjusting all of the data based on new things, new factors that they are seeing that affect it. So you're making a prediction, and it's always going to be a little bit off, and you're always going to be adjusting it as more data basically gives you a better model. So if the numbers are consistent, that person's probably lying. They're probably just making something up. The numbers should always be changing. And all the time that I've been tracking Sensor Tower, the numbers change from the 1st to the 15th. And often you'll look back at the previous month, and then you'll see that the numbers changed from what they said it was last month. But they'll tell you, they're explicitly telling you the number we said was wrong. So it might not be a gacha, because they're the ones exposing themselves. But that's when you understand what they're doing, that should build confidence. Now, it could be a giant scam, but I'm just telling you, though, you're not going to find it that way. That's a good sign that the numbers are being adjusted, because they should be advancing their model and keeping it up with the market as new data arrives. That being said, this number will probably still go up, much like this one did from 6.5. I don't think it'll go up that much, but I think this 10 to 13 million range is a great number for this audience size. I mean, it's still the most fantastic number on the list, but I think this is where you would start to see the stability. And so the reason for this inflation, I think, was because of the standard banner, and you have a very different audience for Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero than you do for Genshin or HSR. These games, the characters don't present a completely different gameplay experience, so they don't have as much inherent value to the audience that is attracted to them. If I don't love the character, if I don't love the character's look, and if they don't make me clear content, then I don't really need them in these games. In these games, you cleared the content, but the entire game changes when you're playing a different character. So if you're there for gameplay, if you're there for character mastery, which is one of the most important things for an action game, then you just want to play everybody. And I noticed that with Rexland. I wailed on the limited characters, but I saw Wexland wailed on all of the standard characters to S6, and I've seen a lot of different people with like S6 Palcharo and S6 John Shin, because they're like, I want to play the character. It's a different value that shows up. So no matter how many similarities there are between Wuthering Waves, how much you think it's a clone, the gameplay changes everything. For one, it filters out a lot of people who might like the game, might like the game quality, but they're like, I don't want to play that hard every day. It's not that it's hard, it's just that it's intense. It forces you to pay attention. You have to memorize the boss, you got to remember them every time the boss shows up. Like, so every event, when you're fighting the same bosses over and over again, if you haven't been staying up with it, it can be a little intense. So there's nothing wrong if that's not you and this is a better game for you. But you just got to recognize how different those two audiences are. So we can't just keep putting them in the same weight class and say that these two models should react similarly. But there's definitely nothing poorly. I'm going to put this. Sensor Tower isn't saying anything bad about Wuthering Waves. In fact, what it's saying makes me ecstatic for the primary reason that I have the evidence now that devs should listen to me. See, because I was expecting that the ratios would be similar for a smaller audience, which would just be a disaster, right? But I had no expectation that it would be this good out of your sweaty gamers, excuse me. And so I'm like, okay, good. I can put this in my feedback, and now I know that the industry, Kuro was always looking, but now everybody's looking to find out what it is that these gamers are willing to pay for. And so if our analysis is correct, if our data is correct, we should see the industry perform accordingly. We should see more people targeting these audiences. And even among Hoyoverse, even at this drop that ZZZ took, you can see that the 20 million is not represented in the loss in players, and it hasn't dropped the value of that audience to where ZZZ will still be the devs listen game of Hoyoverse. So that's how you look at this data. And let me know below if you think I'm crazy or if you think I'm reaching, but it seems pretty basic to me, and the trends in the industry seem to follow what I've got here, and I don't see anything to complain about. So I just wanted to hopefully put that fire out. And lastly, I just really want to reemphasize that a lot of what I'm seeing here, what I'm able to do here, is because of this publicly available data. And you are really able to evaluate a company now and what they're doing with their revenue, what they could be doing with their revenue, so you can really make informed decisions. So this publicly available data resources that come from companies that it is their entire business model to be reliable. They don't benefit in any other way from favoring a company. In fact, that would just tank their entire business structure. So as much as I like to rely on what they say, it is far more valuable to them to be reliable because it's their entire value, right? So hopefully I made a good enough case that people can take a second look at the data, a second look at Wuthering Waves, and a second look at Sensor Tower, and really think it through if they want to burn it to the ground. Lastly, on my way out, I just want to really point out how incredible Wuthering Waves did here. This is Genshin's highest population. If they had ever seen this revenue per player, this is their lowest population, 16.5 million. That would have been $638 million in that single month, just on mobile. All of this is just mobile numbers, mobile players, mobile revenue. Their highest revenue was January 2024, highest player count was January 2024 of 67 million. That would have been $2.6 billion in that month. Do you see now how insanely well Wuthering Waves did? Like, there's no question you should be happy. You're a Wuthering Waves fan, and the data supports your happiness. You can brag. Like, if you're in this group, if you're in either of these groups, you've got stuff to look forward to. It's not just the casuals anymore. People are hunting for us. Devs will listen. We're winning. So that's all I had to share. Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to do some future videos talking about, I think, how they can take advantage of the differences in these audiences. And I think all these games will really benefit from recognizing that they are a neo gacha and the traditional gacha model, not necessarily the gacha system, but the way that the gacha games work are actually holding a lot of these games back from higher revenue potential and higher customer satisfaction. So we're going to talk about that in the future, but thanks for watching this video. Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.